Hello. Let's see. There we go. So, a little bit of my background. I founded the Charter Cities Institute about 6 years ago. Our idea is to promote the idea of charter cities. It's quite related to the concept of free cities. I think kind of thinking about it, we are focusing on areas that have rapidly growing urban populations, namely Africa, because there will be about 1 million new urban residents out there over the next 30 years. And so thinking about how we can create zones of a better business environment, improved economic freedom to attract businesses, to attract residents, to make them successful. And then additionally, about a year and a half ago, I left my role as executive director of the Charter Cities Institute. I'm still chairman, to start Bravo Cities to pursue projects from kind of a commercial angle. And so currently looking at several locations from a commercial perspective that hopefully I'll be able to share with you next year. However, sensitive negotiations and all make it challenging to share information too early. So I think one of the things I've learned in working with governments around the world is, I think, figuring out how to frame these issues in a way that appeals to the local stakeholders, the local community. And so a lot of free city justifications, seasteading justifications, some charter city justifications, they focus on kind of this concept of exit. It's often kind of referred to from Albert Hirschman's famous short book, A Voice, Exit, and Loyalty, where he contrasts, right, exit, leaving an organization or situation, voice, trying to change it, and loyalty, having some kind of allegiance to that group or organization. And these justifications that focus on exit, right, there's a kind of sense that, look, society is wrong in some way. It's corrupt, it's decadent, like we need to build a new society. I think there's definitely an element of truth to some of these critiques, right? Society can definitely be improved. I like to think I've got decent thoughts about how to improve it. This is kind of evidenced in seasteading, voting with your feet. It's evidenced in, for example, one of the brochures that I've seen lying around is kind of, let's opt out. And I think that's kind of good for some intentional communities. It's difficult to do that for city-scale projects. So historically, I think exit was a good justification, right? Venice was founded by refugees. America was founded by people kind of fleeing British, particularly religious institutions. Utah was founded by Mormons who were kind of wanted to build their own society, right? It worked in some historical contexts. However, I think it was able to work in those historical contexts because of specific underlying conditions that have changed over time, right? There was a very large percentage of the population that was engaged in farming. So if you have 90% of the population engaged in farming and you're in the US, it's not hard for you and a bunch of your friends to say, hey, let's move 200 miles west, let's find new farmland, let's cut it down, let's make something work, right? You had relatively localized financial markets. And so because of that, you could have excess savings at a local, at a regional, maybe even at a national level, but right, the kind of modern financial institutions weren't in place that allowed you to kind of build up your own financial institutions in a way that I think is difficult now for kind of large-scale city projects. And I think just to, I guess, clarify, when I'm talking about city projects, I'm talking about hundreds of thousands, if not millions of residents, right? These require billions, tens of billions of dollars of infrastructure investment. They require very strong relations with the host country, with regional institutions. And so they can't be it requires a different structure than intentional communities that might be dozens of people, hundreds of people, where ideological alignment is a kind of an important factor. But on a city level, right, this has different structural constraints that require a different approach. And lastly, right, you had, at least in, for example, the United States, native populations, indigenous populations were very low because of disease, and then you had kind of the implicit or sometimes explicit force of the U.S. government, as well as U.S. states, that kind of allowed you to force them off their land, unjustly in many circumstances, but like that kind of made land, quote unquote, cheap, while today, right, land markets are a bit more developed. So I think, right, like, those conditions have changed. Humanity is increasingly urbanized. We broke 50% urbanization about a decade ago, 7-8 years ago. 25% of humanity works in agriculture. If you look at high-income countries like the United States, it's about 2% works in agriculture. There isn't really terra nullius anymore. I mean, there's a handful of examples, Lieberland, that have some credible claim to terra nullius, but in general, right, like these are places that are very difficult to build, where there might be some contested state ownership claim. While historically, if we go back 100, 200 years, there were much larger areas that didn't have kind of formal modern governance systems, and now that's not really true anymore. I think you have, right, financial markets that are increasingly globalized, where, right, like if you have a problem in the US, that problem will also spill over to Europe because the financial markets are interrelated. There's, to a certain extent, some parallel financial markets with China and kind of the Western world, but, right, to attract the capital, billions, tens of billions of dollars, you need to tap into these financial markets, and to a certain extent, this means playing by the rules of the existing institutions of those groups. Right. Lastly, you've got supply chains, and if you want to build a city, you need a active job market. And right, this can be done in part through people doing remote work, but I think once you get up to populations, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, right, you need to figure out how you integrate within the local supply chain. What is the product that you're offering? Some of this might be remote work to get started, but are you doing tourism? Are you doing manufacturing? Are you doing knowledge work? Right? What is the agglomeration of industries that comes together that makes this a dynamic place to live, that supports the amenities, that supports the kind of general population growth that can make this work? Right, so our approach has been working within existing institutions. It's a little bit less about opting out and more about kind of creating a choice for people in the region, in the country, in the world, to say, hey, I want to opt in, I want to go to this, but not because they're kind of escaping something, but because they see this as a better option than their current situation. So we focus, Andreas Baumgartner kind of went into this yesterday, how to work closely with the host country, focusing on partnership. I think kind of, right, you obviously don't want an antagonistic relationship, but how do you create a win-win for the host country? In my experience, these governments, what they want is job creation, right? They want investment. They want things that help get them reelected. And oftentimes, because if you're working in a democratic country, right, they have election cycles for 5 years, and they're concerned with getting reelected because that's their incentive structure. I think it also means collaborating with the local population, right? What is the skill set of the local population? If it's a relatively low-skilled local population, how do you create jobs for them? If it's a high-skilled, how do you create jobs for them, right? Like, I think there's a risk to some of these projects over the long term if you come in and have kind of a dichotomous situation where high-skilled foreigners come in and the locals work mostly in kind of service sector jobs, right? Over time, that might build up resentment, which might lead to political action against a project. And lastly, I think there is some, right, like friendly relations with relevant international bodies. And so one project, for example, that I'm working on in East Africa, right, we've had early conversations with investment banks about attracting development finance. For example, African Development Bank, African Export-Import Bank, because these are the institutions that finance large-scale infrastructure projects in the region, right? I mean, there's some benefits to this in terms of you need capital for a large-scale infrastructure project. There are some challenges in the sense that these are right, government organizations, so they're a little bit more slow than you would like them to be. They're a little bit more bureaucratic than you'd like them to be. However, they do protect kind of one challenge with these projects is the risk of expropriation, right? What if the government changes their mind? And frequently, if you work with these regional finance bodies, right, they might have 4 or 5 large investments in the country. And so if your project is one of a larger portfolio of investment, the government's much less likely to come and say, hey, we changed our mind, we're going to revoke this concession, because that would threaten the financing arrangements for multiple other large projects in their country. And so by embedding within this kind of larger regional network of finance, of trading, it becomes much more difficult for a government to dislodge you and say, hey guys, just kidding, we're going to revoke this agreement that we had signed. So one example of this is Dubai, right? You can also look at Shenzhen, Singapore, Hong Kong, any of these kind of classic examples. These are all very embedded in the history and the culture of the region, right? These aren't the result of a handful of people from a foreign place coming. These are the result of often local initiatives that bring in foreign expertise, foreign knowledge. However, there's a heavy, heavy local element. And I think this is an important thing, right? How do you find the relevant local partner on the ground that can be your champion, that can say, this project is good for me and my people, how do we make it happen? Right? For example, the Dubai International Financial Center. Part of the reason they did it is because they had an earlier, let me see if I remember correctly, I think the Jebel Ali port, right? That was a port. It was, they brought in actually civil law, not common law for the port, but they realized we need a better legal structure here to attract kind of the large vessels for repair, for transshipment. And then as they grew, they realized, hey, we can do other zones based on this model. They get into finance. They say, what's the best legal system for finance? Common law, right? They create that. So it's deeply embedded in the power structures of the regions. It strongly benefits Emiratis, right, to the extent that many Emiratis don't really have to work because they can live off the kind of residual income from the economic activity that has been generated. And so I think that kind of illustrates how, right, thinking about these at the local, at the regional level, who are the relevant stakeholders, how do we engage them, and how do we make sure that it's possible. So I think my claim is kind of a focus on exit is tactically wrong for the Free Cities movement. I think it should be a focus on how do we create these institutions, how do we create these benefits for the local population, for the regional population, for the government. Right? Governments are naturally concerned about their sovereignty. If you go in and you say, I want to buy sovereignty, 99% of countries are going to kind of laugh in your face, or in a bad scenario, they'll throw you in jail for treason. Right, many countries are worried about large-scale migration. If you have a different population that's coming in that doesn't integrate with the local population that keeps to themselves, many governments, many communities are naturally going to be a little bit suspicious of that. So I think what this looks like is, right, figuring out, all right, most governments will have a plan, right? The plan will say over the next 30 years, we want to create 5 million jobs, we want to create 10 million housing units, right? Whatever this plan is, the government will have it on a website somewhere. They'll follow it to a greater degree or lesser degree. But they're relatively easy to find, and you can say, okay, look, right, you want to do these things, that's great. We can create, right, 5% of the total jobs over the next 30 years. We can create 5% of the total housing units. We can work with you to achieve your national objectives. However, to bring the capital, to bring the businesses that will do that, we need to create a framework that's a little bit more amenable to investment, that's a little bit more, makes it easier to kind of start businesses, right? Nobody on an intellectual level opposes this. Often the challenge is kind of existing bureaucracies with unclear definitions of who's responsible for who, and some special interest groups on the ground that might not want the increased competition. But figuring out kind of how to frame it in these ways that make it a win-win, get everybody to benefit. So yeah, I think focus on local concerns, right? How do you create jobs for a local population? How do you increase government tax revenue? How do you make it not a here's the right way to live, but here's a way that we can work with local communities, local governments to have a positive impact and hopefully build some free cities, charter cities, whatever term you want to call them. So that's my presentation. You can find me, email me, mark@cci.city. My Twitter is mark at Mark Lutter. And we've also got a conference coming up in about 2 months in Kigali. If anybody wants to attend, feel free to come chat with me. It's a bit more focused on kind of Africa for obvious reasons, and kind of fits into this broad pitch about how to work with local institutions, regional institutions to make these things happen. So thank you very much.